In the cold silence of space, an ancient dragon warrior stood on the edge of history, torn between the scars of centuries of war and the fragile promise of peace, when a mysterious child arrived whose small hand would ignite a chain of events powerful enough to change the fate of an entire galaxy. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, let's jump into the story. The Great Citadel drifted in silent orbit, a ring of light around a blue-green world. Under its clear panels, the stars looked close enough to touch. On the upper deck, a lone figure stood like a statue of iron and fire. He was Drasmir, an old dragon warrior whose name whispered through 100 battle reports. His scales were a deep forest green, edged with silver. Every breath rose like smoke in the cool, recycled air. He had fought longer than most histories remembered, yet this calm night felt more dangerous than any battlefield. A peace summit would begin in 2 days. 43 species would gather in one fragile room, and the galaxy would hold its breath. He told himself he watched the planet to study weather patterns and approach lanes. In truth, he watched because he could not sleep. His kind had been shaped for war, trained to hide the heart and sharpen the claws. But age brings strange visitors, memories, doubts, and questions. Would peace make him useless? Or was this at last the fight he had waited for? The fight to protect something gentle, not destroy something feared. The station hummed softly beneath his feet. It was a miracle of cooperation, with adjustable halls and mixed atmospheres so every guest could breathe easy. Tiny gardens grew along the corridors. The scent of alien flowers rode the air, clean and bright. The engineers had designed everything to say one message: welcome. Yet Drasmir's senses caught a different note, like a low chord under cheerful music. Tension, fear, a tremor of bad news not yet spoken. Inspiring stories and real-life stories seldom begin with comfort, he thought. They begin with a shadow. Footsteps approached. A light voice followed them. "You are brooding again," said Marin Hale. She was a human diplomat, younger than half the crew, yet steady as a captain's anchor. She moved with easy balance, her dark blonde hair tied back, her eyes quick with humor. She had earned her place here by stepping between enemies more than once and refusing to move until they spoke to each other. She stopped at his side, small beside his height, and looked out at the planet. Pretty view. Storm bands over the southern sea. Looks peaceful from here. It is not peace, Drasmir said, his voice low. It is the quiet before a test. Tests are good, she answered. They tell us what we still need to learn. He turned his great head, patient and heavy with thought. We have already learned from centuries of loss. Then maybe the test is different this time, she said. Not who can strike hardest, but who can hold steady when fear starts shouting. He tried to smile, but dragons do not smile well. Your species finds courage in curious places. That's because we have short lives, she said, almost laughing. We hate wasting them. Her gaze softened. You, old friend, have a long life. You can wait centuries. But tonight, you do not look patient. You look lonely. The word struck deeper than he expected. lonely. He had stood without company on many decks and many worlds. Yet with the summit near, the station full, and hope within reach, he felt a pull in his chest, like a door opening. He did not know what waited behind it. "I am focused," he said. "Focused for 3 hours," Marin replied. "Station logs do not lie. You check the logs. I check on you." She placed her hand on his forearm. The gesture was simple, human, and warm. Pressure moved through scale and sinew, like a tiny wave. His hearts, stubborn machines that had beaten through war without a tremor, stumbled for a breath. His people had trained away such responses. Yet the body remembers what the training tries to bury. Her touch did not weaken him. It clarified him. He felt the exact weight of what was at stake. Not a treaty, but a future where hands and claws could meet without fear. He looked back at the planet, using the view to steady his voice. The summit brings different tribes. Lupines, Felinians, the crystalline councils, the mechanoid conclaves. Some have never stood in the same room without weapons. Peace is a thin bridge over a deep ravine. One stray stone, and we fall. "Then we build side rails," she said softly. "We build them with trust, clear words, and a schedule that leaves no dark corners. And if someone tries to shake the bridge, ... we hold it together until they stop." She squeezed his arm once, then let go. "You do not have to carry it alone. I have always carried it alone. That was before you had friends." The words settled between them like a lantern. Friends. In search engines and titles, people call it interspecies friendship, unity, hope. In real life, it means someone shows up when the night is heavy. He considered how often Marin had shown up. The count was high. Alarms remained silent. The corridor lights stayed calm. Still, suspense pressed like a hand on the glass. He felt a pattern forming, a shape in the dark beyond the station's glow. Something would come to test their promise of unity. He knew this as surely as he knew the feel of a spear in his palm. He also knew one more thing, and saying it surprised him. "If the test comes," he said, "we will not answer it with anger first." "Good," Marin said. "Anger is loud, and everyone hears it. Courage is quiet, and everyone feels it." A service drone drifted past, lights winking. Far below, shuttles crossed like sparks. Drasmir imagined the delegates in their quarters, some praying, some planning, some packing escape routes, just in case. He understood them. Fear is the oldest storyteller. It writes fast and forgets the truth. The voiceover in his head spoke to an unseen audience, as if telling a lesson for the young and the tired. Hold steady. Listen longer. Remember why you wanted peace in the first place. "Tell me about your home," Marin said after a while, "before all the battles." He hesitated. Dragons do not often share old songs. Then the memory rose like dawn over stone valleys. "We carved cities into crystal cliffs," he said. "We shaped melodies that bent the light. Our voices could carry a note from one mountain to the next." "You sang," she whispered, "long ago. Maybe you will sing again." The idea felt impossible, and yet not entirely foolish. He let it rest in the room, like a seed not ready to sprout. "Perhaps." He paused, then added in a tone he rarely used, almost gentle, "Stay near during the summit. not as guard, but as company. "I was going to anyway," she said, smiling in her quiet, human way. "Company? Sounds nice." Through the clear panels, a thin meteor line stitched the night. Drasmir followed it until it faded. He stood straighter, not because the weight had vanished, but because it had shifted, shared at last. This was the first step of many steps, the beginning of an inspiring story meant to travel across worlds. A real-life story, told in simple words. A warrior learned to stand with others. A diplomat learned to trust a dragon's heart. Together, they watched over a bridge of peace and waited for whatever shadow would try to break it. The old warrior breathed in. The citadel exhaled around him. In the stillness, he made a quiet vow fit for any voiceover and any search bar. Unity, courage. He would defend those four like a shield. The future knocked softly at the door. He was ready to open it. The citadel's quiet rhythm shattered when alarms pierced the corridors. Lights shifted from calm white to pulsing amber, signaling danger. Drasmir lifted his head at once, his instincts as sharp as ever, despite his age. A message echoed through the wide halls, calling for emergency teams at the outer docking bay. Something had gone wrong. Marin Hale appeared at his side, her eyes wide but steady. "An incoming shuttle is requesting immediate clearance," she said. No one expected another arrival tonight. Together, they moved quickly through the station's curved passageways, past diplomats and guards who whispered nervous questions. Fear moved faster than footsteps, and the tension spread like smoke. Drasmir said nothing as his massive frame carried him forward, his claws clicking softly against the reinforced floor. He had learned long ago that silence often carried more weight than words. When they reached the bay, the shuttle's doors were already hissing open. The air smelled of coolant and burnt wiring. Stumbling down the ramp came Ambassador Corin Silverpelt, the lupine elder known for his sharp counsel and fierce loyalty. His golden fur was darkened with fluid, his breath ragged. Behind him, a younger aide supported a small human child, her hair tangled, her clothes torn. Marin rushed forward. "What happened?" Corin's ears twitched as he fought for breath. "Pirates," he growled. "They struck without warning. They wanted her. They knew exactly who she was." The child was unconscious, limp in the aide's arms. Drasmir bent low, his scales catching the overhead lights, and the younger aide carefully passed her to him. His claws cradled her with surprising gentleness. She was no more than 8 years old, as he studied her fragile face. Her eyelids fluttered. Slowly, she opened her eyes and met his. Instead of the terror he expected, she smiled faintly. "Pretty dragon," she whispered, and lifted one small hand to touch the edge of his snout. Time seemed to stop. Drasmir had been called many things across centuries. Terrifying, merciless, unbreakable, but never pretty. Never anything close to soft. The words touched a part of him he thought had been burned out long ago. Marin's voice broke the stillness. "Who is she?" Corin steadied himself. "Lyra Harper, daughter of Admiral Jareth Harper." Marin's breath caught. The Admiral's name carried weight. He was the architect of the first ceasefire between Draconians and Mechanoids. If his daughter was being targeted, it meant the peace summit itself was in danger. Drasmir felt his scales shift slightly, a natural response of his species when unsettled. "Then this is not random," he rumbled. "It is sabotage." "Exactly," Marin said, her tone grim. "Someone wants the summit to collapse before it begins. Fear will spread. Mistrust will follow. The treaty could fail." Lyra stirred again, her hand still resting against Drasmir's scales, as if she trusted him without question. The warrior felt a strange warmth in that fragile gesture. He knew what it meant to hold the weight of armies, but this small hand carried a weight of another kind. "We must protect her," Corin declared, his voice stronger now, despite his wounds. "If the pirates wanted her, they will try again." Marin nodded. "We will, but we cannot allow panic to reach the delegations. If word spreads too quickly, old prejudices will ignite." Drasmir straightened, still holding Lyra close. "She is safe with me," he said. The certainty in his voice silenced the room. As security officers rushed to secure the bay, Marin stepped closer. "Drasmir, this changes everything. The treaty is already fragile. If we fail now, the galaxy may fall back into war." He met her gaze, his emerald eyes steady. "Then we will not fail." The bay quieted, though tension still hung thick in the air. The child's breathing evened, and she relaxed against the old dragon's chest. Marin watched the unlikely pair, a warrior built for war, and a child barely beginning her life, and felt a spark of hope. They moved together toward the medical wing, Corin limping beside them. The corridors seemed longer than before, filled with the echo of their urgent steps. Whispers followed. A child, an attack, pirates, sabotage. In the medical chamber, healers worked quickly, scanning Lyra and stabilizing her condition. "She has been drugged," one announced, "but she will recover with rest." Marin exhaled slowly. "Then we have a chance." Drasmir stood at the bedside, refusing to leave. He kept watch over Lyra, as if guarding a treasure no one else could see. In his long life, he had defended fortresses, fleets, and entire worlds. Yet in that moment, it was the safety of a single child that mattered most. He felt the weight of destiny shifting. This child was no accident. She was at the heart of what was to come. The old dragon warrior, who had carried centuries of scars and silence, now carried the fragile hope of peace in the form of a sleeping child. And those shadows pressed closer. He vowed quietly that no harm would reach her while he still drew breath. For in her presence, he sensed a truth deeper than treaties or politics. Sometimes the future of worlds rests not in weapons or war, but in the trust of a single small hand. The citadel was alive with voices, but none carried calm. The great hall where the peace summit was meant to begin had filled with murmurs of fear. A massive silhouette had appeared just outside the station's defense perimeter. To many, it looked like a warship, vast and armed, casting a shadow across the fragile hope of the treaty. Alarms whispered at the edge of hearing, and nervous delegates spoke of retreat. Drasmir stood with Marin Hale at the center of the gathering, his towering figure still and watchful. Corin Silverpelt, still limping from his wounds, leaned close. "They demand the summit be cancelled," he growled. "They say if we do not comply, the citadel will be destroyed." Marin raised her voice, steady but urgent. We cannot give in to threats. If we retreat now, every enemy of peace will know how to break us. We must understand what we are facing before we choose. Then, to everyone's surprise, the small voice of Lyra Harper carried across the room. The child stood close to Drasmir, her eyes fixed on the display. It's not a warship, she whispered. It's alive. It's scared. The hall fell silent. Drasmir turned toward her slowly. You are certain? When they took me, she said softly, the pirates spoke of it. They called it a Leviathan. They said it was forced to obey. It didn't want to. A shiver passed through the room. Leviathans were creatures of legend, vast beings that drifted in the void between stars, peaceful and rare. If the pirates had chained one, then the shadow outside was not an enemy by choice, but a prisoner. Marin's mind raced. Then this is not only about us. If the Leviathan is enslaved, it suffers as we do. We must free it. If we succeed, the peace will be stronger than any treaty signed on paper. Drasmir's deep voice joined hers. But how do we speak to it? Words will not reach a creature of gravity and light. Lyra's gaze was steady. You don't talk, you sing. Confusion flickered among the delegates, but Marin seized the thought. Music is more than sound. It is harmony, rhythm, connection. If we can shape those patterns through the Citadel's systems, we might send a message it can feel. The insectoid mathematicians clicked their approval. Frequencies can be translated, one buzzed. Gravity waves can carry song. The avian delegation spread their wings and offered their natural pitch. We understand harmonics, they said. We will join. The mechanoid conclave calculated aloud, their mechanical voices sharp and precise. We will reconfigure the generators. Translation is possible. Slowly, a plan formed. Instead of arming weapons, the Citadel would become an instrument. The great gravity systems would shift from defense to resonance. Species that had once fought each other now stood shoulder to shoulder, assigning tasks, preparing the hall itself to sing. Drasmir felt something stir deep in his chest, an old echo of forgotten days. His people had not always been warriors. Long ago, they had shaped melodies that shook mountains and carved light into beauty. He had not sung in centuries. Marin looked at him with quiet certainty. Your voice will lead this. The Draconians still carry the memory. When the moment came, the station lights dimmed. The hum of power rose, soft at first, then steady. The delegates gathered in a circle, each species ready. Drasmir opened his throat, and a low tone filled the chamber. It vibrated through the walls, deep and resonant, like the core of the world itself. Others joined. The avians trilled high above him. The lupines lifted their voices in rhythmic howls. The insectoids created clicking patterns that beat like drums. Even the mechanoids gave a steady synthetic pulse, anchoring the song in perfect measure. And then, small and fragile, Lyra began to sing. Her voice was not strong, but it cut through everything else. Simple, human, honest. The sound wrapped itself around the harmonies, weaving all the threads into one tapestry of meaning. The Citadel itself seemed to tremble as the gravity generators carried the patterns outward. On the screen, the Leviathan shifted, Its bioluminescent skin flickered, first in agitation, then slowly in rhythm with the song. Light danced across its vast body, pulsing with recognition. The hall held its breath. Then impossibly, the creature answered. Gravitational waves rippled back, translated into glowing patterns across the display. It was not a voice of words, but a reply all could understand. Sorrow, hope, and relief. The delegates gasped. For the first time, enemies and allies alike shared the same silence of awe. The Leviathan was not their destroyer. It was their witness. Drasmir's chest shook with the effort of the song, but he did not stop. Marin's eyes shone as she added her voice, steady and warm. Around them, the circle grew louder, fuller, united. In that moment, the citadel became more than stone and steel. It became proof. Proof that 43 species could create something together no single one could shape alone. The old dragon warrior felt the truth in his bones. This was the real treaty. Not signatures, not words, but harmony. And as the Leviathan's light answered them with brilliance across the stars, the galaxy saw its first true glimpse of unity. The Leviathan drifted outside the citadel, its vast form glowing with pulses of light. Chains of cruel machinery still clung to its body, metal parasites forcing it to obey its captors. Though the Song of Unity had reached it, the creature remained bound. The summit could not continue while a living being suffered. Drasmir knew what had to be done. The old dragon warrior stepped forward, his eyes steady. "Those devices must be destroyed," he said. "But weapons will kill the Leviathan along with the chains. There is only one way." Marin Hale shook her head before he even finished. "No, you cannot. Not alone." "I was built for this," he replied. "Within me lies a force my ancestors carried, an energy that can break machines. It will free the creature." Lyra Harper, the small child who had already shifted the fate of worlds with her voice, gripped his claw. "I will try, little one, but sometimes freedom asks for risk." A shuttle was prepared. Marin insisted on joining him, despite his protests. "If you fall," she said, "you will not fall alone." Corin Silverpelt and even a mechanoid ally named Servo offered their strength. In the end, the team that boarded the vessel was a strange circle of dragon, human, lupine, machine, and child. Yet it was this very mixture that carried the hope of peace. The shuttle launched, gliding toward the living mountain of the Leviathan. Its vast eye, deep and luminous, turned toward them, as if recognizing their intent. Defensive turrets built into the parasites began to fire, streaks of energy cutting the dark. "Hold steady," Marin ordered, as she guided the shuttle through the storm. Drasmir moved to the airlock, his wings shifting in preparation. 30 seconds, Corin warned. "That is all you will have." Drasmir leapt into the void. Space wrapped around him, silent and cold. Yet he moved with. Fire burst from his jaws, not as weapon, but as thrust, propelling him closer. The turrets targeted him, but his body twisted and spun with surprising grace for one so large. He reached the core device, a cluster of machines sunk deep into the Leviathan's hide. Placing both claws against it, he summoned the ancient energy within his chest. Light spread along his scales. Then, with a roar that shook even the vacuum, he released a massive surge. An electromagnetic pulse rippled outward, shorting every parasite at once. Sparks burst, chains broke, and the Leviathan shuddered in a cry of release. But when the light faded, Drasmir floated motionless, his body limp. "Bring him back!" Marin shouted, driving the shuttle forward. Servo and Corin pulled the dragon inside. His breathing was shallow, his scales darkened by the effort. Lyra pressed her small hand to his chest and whispered, "Wake up." Her voice trembled, but her trust did not waver. After long moments, Drasmir's eyes opened weakly. "Did we succeed?" "Look," Marin said, her voice breaking with relief. On the view screen, the Leviathan pulsed with radiant light. It turned slowly, free for the first time in years. With a final surge, it opened a rift in space, a natural jump point, and vanished into the stars. The Citadel erupted with celebration. The threat had ended, not with weapons, but with courage and cooperation. 2 days later, the peace summit began, yet it was not the cold, formal event the delegates had expected. It became a celebration. Species that once stood apart now mingled freely. Mechanoids spoke beside Felinians. Lupines shared food with avians. Old barriers dissolved under the memory of their shared song. At the center of it all stood Drasmir, still weary but alive, with Marin at his side and Lyra holding his claw. The child had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that innocence and trust could achieve what centuries of war had failed. Ambassador Star Runner of the Equine people approached with a smile. "When warriors become family, we mark the moment," she said gently. "And today, you are more than allies. You are bound." Drasmir glanced at Marin, their hands unconsciously entwined. He had no words for the feeling that surged in his chest, but Marin's quiet smile told him she understood. Years later, the Citadel still orbited above the world. Peace had held, not without challenges, but stronger with every passing day. Drasmir once again stood on the observation deck, though this time he was not alone. Marin's hair carried threads of silver now, and Lyra had grown tall, practicing forms of strength he had taught her. They were chosen as ambassadors of a new era, living proof that unity was more than an idea. It was a bond forged in trust, in sacrifice, and in the courage to care across differences. As the stars stretched before him, Drasmir spoke softly. "I once thought love was weakness, but it is not. ... It is the greatest strength a warrior can hold," Marin answered without hesitation. "Then keep holding it, for however long we have." And in that moment, the dragon, the human, and the child stood together as family, a family that carried not only their own future, but the hope of a galaxy learning at last to live in peace.